Hi there, I'm Lori McNee with Eye on Sun Valley, and this is Art Beat. And today I'm at my neighborhood pond, plein air painting. Plein air painting is the discipline of painting outside. I'm an artist and a workshop instructor, and in a few moments I'm going to take you across my pond over to Giverny, France, where we're going to visit the magical gardens of the most famous Impressionist painter, Claude Monet. Claude Monet is one of the most famous artists in the world because he was the leader of the Impressionists. The Impressionists were a group of artists who rebelled against the traditional method of painting. This was actually at the time rather scandalous. Up until then, it was more academic painting. It was usually dark, sharp colors, and they showed so much detail. Monet and his contemporaries, on the other hand, went outside and they were painting the light. Monet was very much intrigued with, again, the effects of light on his subject. And that was plein air painting, painting outside, where they would go out and take tubed paints, which at the time was a new phenomenon. Up until tube paint was invented, they used a bladder and put the paint inside. So it was really difficult to paint outside. So actually the evolution of a paint tube really helped with the plein air painting movement. And also just the grand scale in which he worked. The Water Lily series of paintings are so large. They're probably around 30 feet long, and now they are hanging in the Orangerie in Paris. They made a special museum just to hang his beautiful Water Lily series of art for all to enjoy. The Impressionists were interested in painting light. They were fascinated with it, and you can see this in Monet's work, especially in his Water Lily series, where he painted the water and the effects of the light on the water and the flowers. And so it was a school of art where they got together, camaraderie, and they'd go out and plein air paint, which is a phrase for painting outside. It was coined by the Impressionists, painting outside. And they would take pochade boxes out with them, or French easels. And pochade box is a smaller version of a French easel that they came up with. They took cigar boxes and made little paint boxes out of them. And they'd go out into the gardens and around Giverny and paint during the day, and just were fascinated again with the effects of light on their subject. So the gardens are in Giverny, France, a beautiful little village. It is just the most charming place in Normandy, an hour outside of Paris. And back in the day, you could take a train to there, and now, of course, there's highways that get us there. And it's this beautiful little village, very small, very manicured, and places like Carmel, California are kind of patterned after this sort of place. Just beautiful cottages, and very few locals live there. During the day, it is busy with tourists. It's like Disneyland on the streets. But after 5 p.m. when the gardens close, there's barely anybody there except the locals. And again, that is such a magical time to wander around and just enjoy the beautiful little town that it is. Many of the same buildings are there, many of the little farms, the Charlotte cows that so many of the Impressionists love to go there and paint still are there on the farmland surrounding Monet's house. And there's this famous hotel called the Hotel Baudy, and it was built back in the late 1800s for a place where the Impressionists from around the world can go and paint. And that is still standing today. And it's really fun to go in there because they have paintings all around the building that were painted by Impressionists from all around the world, and especially the Americans went there. And so my workshop has been in the tradition that really happened in Giverny, where the American Impressionists went to paint, and to paint with Monet, and and so I've been continuing the tradition. Monet's garden is really quite large. It's actually two gardens. Down the center of the garden is a railroad track, or it used to be the railroad that Monet used to ride the train back and forth from Paris to his gardens. And now it's been turned into a highway. And the garden on one side of the track is a flower garden, a mince flower garden. And then you go through a tunnel to the other side, which leads you to the famous water lily gardens. Probably together, I would at least think the size of possibly even 2 football fields, his gardens, for sure 1, but just very immense, a lot of work. Those gardeners do an amazing job every morning and evening while the public's not there to create a beautiful environment for us to be transported back in time. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back.
Better food, better price, better service. Atkinson's Market, supporting local farmers since 1956.
I moved out to Idaho 4 years ago, so I met a lot of people and I really, really like it here. You know, if you don't have something like that that brings you into other people's lives, it takes a long time to get to know people.
Welcome back. Let me take you back into the magical gardens of Monet. When the people from art colony Giverny invited me to go to France to paint in Monet's gardens, I was actually just shocked and thrilled. It to me felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Very few people are invited to bring a group of artists into the gardens. And actually during the day while the gardens are open to the public, no painters really are allowed because it's crowded and there's not enough room for artists to set up their paint boxes. So for me to have the opportunity to be able to go into the gardens and teach in the footsteps of Monet when the public isn't there, it just was the most exciting, almost the most exciting moment in my career as an artist. So Monet's Gardens is such a magical place and loved by many artists and art lovers and gardeners and enthusiasts, just want to go there and visit. And it was his home, and it took many years to develop his extensive gardens, which are manicured beautifully, and they're quite large and grand. And it's just so wonderful to walk into his gardens and see what he saw that now has been translated into paint and is so famous in the museums around the world. Many of the same trees are even there. They do such an amazing job with the gardens. They rotate flowers, and they're constantly working every morning and evening. And one of the wonderful experiences that I was able to have with my students is we were able to go into the gardens before they open to the public and after they close at the end of the day, when the public left after 5 p.m. And I was able to go in with my 8 to 10 students, and we were able to be in there with the gardeners by ourselves and experience the quiet and the sanctuary that his gardens were to him. And we were able to paint at the lily pond and within the beautiful gardens that the same kind of flowers that he painted, and many of the same trees and vegetation are still there. So each morning started with a typical French breakfast. We generally have a croissant and a strong cup of coffee to start the day. And then we would walk on over to Monet's house in the morning. It was quite early, about 6:45. We had to be at the garage doors every morning strictly at 7 a.m. They open the garage for us, and if we do not get through those doors before they close automatically, we're locked out. It was, again, a special moment to peer into the life of Monet, where he parked his car
And just walking into his garage was really interesting. All his old garden tools were there, and the tools that the gardeners use today are in the garage. And we'd walk through and into the garden from there, and it just was breathtaking every time we'd walk in to the garden in the morning as the sun was rising. And the flowers, the beautiful saturated color of all the flowers, the birds are singing, it's quiet time of day. I had such a reverence every time that morning, in the morning, walking through those doors. And from there, my students and I would quietly move around and take photos, and we'd set up and paint a little bit. Walking through the front door of Monet's own personal home was just very enchanting. The way he decorated it, he loved color, and you can see that obviously in his paintings, and it also reflected in his home. Again, I was able to go into his home while the public wasn't there, and during the day, it's like Disneyland crowded. And so to walk through his doors and be the only person in each of the rooms was just very special. It felt sacred. From his sunny dining room that's bright yellow to his beautiful kitchen with bright copper pans and perfectly polished oven, and just to imagine the artists that used to sit around the dining room table with him and enjoy talking about art, and it just was so much fun to see.
I hope you enjoyed my quick little tour of Monets Gardens. You know, I've been so grateful to go over there for the past few years, teaching workshops to students from around the world. Thank you to Art Colony de Giverny for inviting me to be an instructor. Maybe one day you can join me in Monets Gardens, or in Sun Valley, Idaho, or one of my other workshops that I teach from around the world. Meanwhile, I hope to see you back here again on Art Beat.